The beginning wasn't a fight. It wasn't some huge dramatic scene. It started with a question that shouldn't have meant anything. "Who's Marcus?" I asked. She looked up from her phone too quickly, too guilty. Her eyes darted just for a second before she caught herself and smiled, that fake kind of smile you give when you're already halfway out the door. "He's a client." "Why?" "No reason," I said, pretending to believe it, already feeling something dark start to spread in my chest. See, I wasn't born suspicious. I wasn't the guy who checked phones, tracked locations, or memorized passwords. I trusted her more than I trusted anyone. But this was the second time I'd heard the name in 2 weeks, and this time it wasn't from her mouth. It popped up on the screen while she was in the kitchen. Her phone lit up. "Marcus, you free tonight?" She didn't know I saw. I didn't mention it. Not yet. But that question started a chain reaction inside me like a fuse on dynamite. And when I say I didn't sleep that night, I mean my body laid in the bed next to hers, but my brain was replaying the way her voice changed when she spoke to him on the phone the day before. Softer. Sweeter. The way she used to talk to me in the beginning, when I was still her world and not just furniture she walked past. The next morning, she left early for work. I waited exactly 25 minutes, then called her office. "Oh, she's not in yet," her assistant said cheerfully. "She mentioned she'd be working remotely today." Remotely, right? I didn't go to work. I didn't shower. I didn't eat. I got in my car and drove around like a lunatic. No real destination. Just this frantic need to find the truth. And I did. Too easily, actually. That was the part that stung the most. She wasn't even trying to hide it. I found her downtown, sitting outside a tiny coffee shop, sunglasses on, her hair up in that fake casual way she does when she wants to look like she just threw something on even though it takes an hour. She was laughing. Not the tight, polite laugh I got when I asked if she wanted to watch something together. No. This was a real laugh. A full-body, I'm enjoying myself laugh. And sitting across from her, with his hand resting casually on the table too close to hers, was a man I'd never seen before. I didn't approach. I didn't make a scene. I just stood there for maybe 3 minutes, unnoticed, absorbing every detail, the way she tilted her head, the way her knee touched his under the table, the way she touched her hair when he said something. She used to do that with me. I went home. I didn't cry. I didn't punch a wall. I just sat on the edge of the bathtub and stared at the tile, wondering how long I'd been the extra in a movie I thought I was starring in. When she came home that night, she brought takeout. Thai food. My favorite. And that was what made me snap. The takeout. The casual cruelty of pretending nothing happened. The performance of normalcy, like I hadn't just watched her flirt with a stranger while I melted in the background. "Good day at work?" I asked. She nodded. "Busy. Exhausting." "I saw you." Her hand froze, still inside the paper bag. "Saw me?" "Marcus," I said. Everything went still. I mean everything. The sound died. The house seemed to shrink. She slowly turned, her expression flat. Not scared. Not ashamed. Just calculating. Then she shrugged. "So?" And that Reddit was the beginning. Not the fight. Not the cheating. That shrugged, that was the point of no return. Because in that moment, I realized something that split me down the middle. She didn't care that I knew. Not really. She had already made peace with being a traitor. She just hadn't told me yet. And I was about to learn just how far the rot had spread. She didn't bother denying it. That was the first real surprise. No scrambling for lies, no fake tears, no pathetic justifications. She just stared at me with this weird expression, like I was an obstacle in her day, like I'd walked into her Zoom meeting without knocking. "I figured you'd find out eventually," she said, setting the food down with zero ceremony. "I was going to tell you. I just didn't feel like dealing with your meltdown." I stood there, stunned, as her words landed like punches to the chest. Not even the betrayal burned the most, it was the indifference. Like what she'd done wasn't even worth raising her voice over. "You didn't feel like dealing with me? Are you hearing yourself?" She looked at me like I was the insane one. "Ryan, what did you think was going to happen? You've been boring for months. You don't talk about anything except your stupid job. You come home, you eat, you sit on your phone, you sleep. What exactly was I supposed to feel?" I couldn't believe it. She was doing that. Turning this around. Painting me as the problem. The one who gave up. The one who made her do it. I actually laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because my body didn't know what else to do. And Marcus, I asked, is that serious? Or is he just one of many? Now she looked irritated. He's not some rando. He actually listens to me. We talk. He's interesting. He makes me feel like I exist again. And I don't. She rolled her eyes. You used to. Before you became whatever this is. Don't act like I'm the villain when you haven't looked at me like a woman in a year. There it was. The script. Right out of the handbook. Blame him for your boredom. For your own lies. For your choices. I could feel the blood in my ears. Feel my hands tighten. But I didn't yell. Not yet. Did you sleep with him? She gave me a long look. The stare really cold. Straight through me. And then she turned, walked to the living room, and sat down on the couch like this was just another Thursday evening. That's not your business anymore. Not your business anymore. That sentence didn't just break the camel's back. It set the whole barn on fire. You're married to me, I said, my voice shaking, and you tell me it's not my business if you're screwing someone else? Oh, screw off, Ryan. You think just because we have rings I owe you some kind of performance? You think I'm yours forever just because we signed a piece of paper? She stood up then like she was the victim, like she was offended. I'm done pretending. You want honesty? Fine. I don't love you. I haven't in a long time. Marcus makes me feel alive. You make me feel stuck. That's it. The floor dropped out from under me. She walked right past me, picked up her bag, and went upstairs like she had just told me the weather. I sat down on the kitchen floor and stayed there for a long time, surrounded by Thai food I couldn't eat and the stench of my own humiliation. I didn't sleep that night either. Only this time it wasn't out of confusion. It was something else. Rage. Grief. Clarity. The kind that comes when someone spits in your face and expects you to thank them for it. I didn't know what my next move was yet, but one thing was absolutely certain. I wasn't going to let her walk away clean. I woke up the next morning on the couch. Not because I was too sad to sleep in the bed. Not because I wanted her to feel guilty. But because the idea of lying next to her, hearing her breathe, knowing what I knew, it would have driven me insane. The bedroom door was shut. Lights off. Like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't torn the roof off our life and set it on fire the night before. And still, she had the nerve to sleep like a baby, wrapped up in my sheets, on the bed I paid for. I got up, made coffee like a machine, and just sat there watching the window. My mind was racing in 1,000 directions, every version of me screaming at once. One part of me wanted to throw her stuff out the window. Another part wanted to walk upstairs, grab my keys, and vanish. But the loudest part? The one that burned the hottest? I wanted her to regret everything. She came down an hour later, looking like nothing had happened. Hair tied up, wearing my hoodie, and scrolling on her phone like it was a Sunday morning and not the fallout of a nuclear betrayal. She didn't even say good morning. Just walked straight to the fridge and opened it. You're unbelievable, I said, staring at her. She turned slightly, one eyebrow raised, almost amused. You're still sulking? That word. Sulking. Like I was throwing a tantrum over a bad dinner and not the complete collapse of our marriage. I stood up. I want you to pack your stuff and leave. She snorted. Snorted. Oh. You think you can just kick me out of my house? My house, I said. Bought it before I met you. Your name's not on a single document. That stopped her. Just for a second. She put the milk back in the fridge and shut the door with this slow, deliberate calm that made my skin crawl. So what, this is you being a man now? Throwing me out like some villain? Grow up. No. This is me drawing a line. You made your choice. You chose Marcus. Go live in his world now. She crossed her arms, eyes sharp now, lips pressed into that bitter smirk she always used when she thought she was winning. You're going to regret this. You think I'm the bad guy, but you weren't exactly husband of the year. I didn't cheat, I said, stepping closer. I didn't lie. I didn't come home smelling like someone else and pretend it was my perfume. I didn't gaslight you, didn't belittle you, didn't make you question your own sanity. You want a trophy for doing the bare minimum? No, I said. I want you gone. Her expression didn't change. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. Instead, she gave me this chilling little nod. Fine. I'll go. But don't expect this to end clean. You don't know what I've told people. You don't know what stories I've already planted. You think everyone's going to see this and say, poor Ryan? You're delusional. It was the first moment I realized she'd been preparing for this. Weeks, maybe months. She'd been writing the ending to this story behind my back while I still thought we were living in the middle of it. And that terrified me more than the cheating. Because I wasn't just losing a wife, I was dealing with someone who'd already weaponized the truth. She started packing that night. Quiet. Efficient. No tears, no apologies. Just grabbing things like she was stealing them. And maybe she was. I didn't help. I watched. Memorized every movement. Every lie she didn't say. Every apology she didn't bother faking. And when she walked out the door with her suitcase and her smug little exit line, "You'll miss me when you realize how empty it feels without me," I didn't respond. But deep inside me, something cold and clean had settled. She was right. It would feel empty. But that's because for the first time in years, I'd gotten rid of the poison. The silence after she left wasn't peaceful. It was surgical, cold, sterile, like walking into a room that used to be full of music, only to realize someone cut the strings on every instrument and turned off the power. I thought I'd feel relief. I didn't. I felt like a crime scene that hadn't been cleaned up yet. But here's the thing. When someone lies to you that long, when they live in your house and kiss your cheek and smile while planting landmines under your feet, you don't just lose trust. You lose time, reality. You start questioning everything that came before the betrayal. Was that laugh real? That trip to Denver last year, was she already texting him back then? Did she kiss me goodbye on Monday morning and go to him by lunchtime? So I started digging. Not because I was obsessed. Not because I wanted her back. But because I needed the truth, the full truth. I couldn't move on with just the scraps she threw at me in the kitchen like she was tossing away garbage. The first clue was the credit card. I pulled up our last 6 months of joint statements and went line by line. She'd made a few mistakes, dinners she claimed were girls' nights, lift rides to areas she never mentioned, charges to hotels that didn't make sense for a married woman who was supposedly working late. Then I found his last name. Marcus Benton. She had slipped once, saved his contact as MB. When she denied it, I believed her. Idiot. But now that I had the name, I did what any modern man would do. I opened social media. He was right there. Big smile. Personal trainer. Lean, loud, and proud. His profile wasn't private, and it was full of photos, gym videos, group outings, a few selfies in restaurants I recognized because I'd taken her to those same places. Then I saw it. March 5th, photo of him and a woman with her back turned. Blonde. Same coat I bought her for Christmas. Caption, when dinner tastes better with the right company. The comments were worse. Friends tagging him, joking. You're glowing, bro. Finally got her, huh? She looks familiar. Yeah, because she was married to me. That's when the rage hit. Not like before. Not hot and explosive. This was different. Focused. Clinical. I messaged him. I didn't threaten him. Didn't yell. I said, hope she told you everything before she moved in with you. Including the part where she drained my account, lied to my face, and played both of us. You're not the first. Might not be the last. He didn't reply. But 5 hours later, I got a text from her. Are you serious right now? Messaging him? You're pathetic. There it was again. That tone. That effortless shift into blame mode. I was the villain for pulling back the curtain. So I replied, I just told him the truth. Something you're allergic to. No answer after that. Until the next day. A friend of mine, Tanner, called me pissed. What the hell happened with you two? Apparently, she'd already started spreading the narrative. That I was controlling. Distant. Emotionally abusive. That she escaped from a cold, empty marriage. And she had people buying it. Crying on cue. Reposting inspirational breakup quotes. Painting herself like some kind of survivor. And Marcus? He dumped her. Blocked her, even. Suddenly, she wasn't so smug anymore. The next message came a week later. I'm sorry. Can we talk? Not I messed up. Not I want to explain. Just can we talk, like we were old friends who had a simple misunderstanding. And that's when something inside me clicked into place. She thought she could fall, land on me again, and start the cycle over. But I wasn't that man anymore. Not even close. I didn't reply to her message. Not immediately. Not out of pettiness and not because I was playing some kind of game. I just didn't feel the need. That woman had detonated our life, walked out of the smoke with a smile, and now she wanted to talk, like we were picking out paint for a guest room. She'd had her moment. She'd taken her swing. Now it was my turn to choose the terms. I gave it 5 days. During that time, I started cleaning house, literally and figuratively. Tossed the wine glasses she loved. Got rid of that stupid abstract painting she insisted on hanging in the hallway. Washed the bedding she used like she owned the world. It wasn't about being dramatic. It was about reclaiming the space. I wasn't going to sit around breathing in her perfume and calling it nostalgia. Then I replied, we can talk. Public place. 30 minutes. That's all you get. She answered in 2 minutes. Suggested a cafe near her old yoga studio. Classic. Neutral ground. I agreed. The day of the meeting, she showed up dressed like she was starring in a breakup movie. Hair done. Makeup flawless. Fake vulnerability painted all over her face like a mask she couldn't wait to take off once she got what she wanted. I walked in, nodded, sat across from her. Didn't order anything. Didn't smile. First thing out of her mouth. You look tired. Been sleeping great, actually. She blinked. That wasn't the line she was expecting. She was trying to get a read on me, but the temperature in the room had changed, and she didn't know how to adjust. She leaned forward, resting her arms on the table like we were conspirators. I didn't mean for any of this to happen the way it did. I was in a dark place. I wasn't thinking clearly. Funny how clearly you were thinking when you booked hotel rooms and deleted messages. Her mouth twisted slightly. You don't know everything. Then tell me. Let's skip the lies. I've heard enough fiction to last a lifetime. She hesitated, then sighed like she was the one carrying the emotional weight. Marcus was impulsive. I thought he was something else. I was stupid. And I was lonely. You were gone all the time. Work. Stress. You weren't present. There it is again, I said calmly. The subtle blame. That if you had just been more fun, more exciting, more everything, I wouldn't have fallen on someone else's lap argument. She looked hurt. Or tried to. I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying it was complicated. No. You're saying you were selfish. That's the only simple truth here. She leaned back, expression cooling. I didn't come here to fight. You came here to what? Patch it up? Pretend none of it happened? Slide back into the life you stomped all over. Her silence told me I was right. I shook my head. You thought Marcus would be the next chapter. You thought he was your escape. Then he kicked you out of the fantasy and now you're circling back, hoping the place you burned down magically rebuilt itself while you were gone. That's not fair, no. What's not fair is that I gave you loyalty, time, love, actual love, and you treated it like background noise. Her voice cracked a little. I miss what we had. I laughed. Quiet, humorless. You miss the version of me that made your life easier. The guy who picked up the pieces while you played dress-up with your double life. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Finally, she said the one thing she should have led with. I want to come back. There it was. The real reason. Not the apology. Not the closure. Just the attempt at re-entry. Like this was an airport and she was tired of the turbulence. I leaned in, slow, deliberate. I left when I found out about your affair. A year later, you came back, asking for forgiveness. I want you to remember that sentence because that's going to be your story now. And I hope you tell it well, because I won't be part of the sequel. She sat there frozen. All that effort, the makeup, the charm, the carefully chosen phrases, all of it crumbled in 10 seconds. And I walked out before she could reply. That was the day I finally felt the silence turn into peace. And it only gets better from here. After the cafe, I thought that would be the end of it. I genuinely believed she'd vanish. Lick her wounds, maybe rebrand herself as a victim in the next guy's story, and move on. But I forgot something crucial. She wasn't just a liar. She was relentless. 2 weeks passed. I was good. I was better, actually. Woke up lighter. Cleaned out the last few digital traces of her. Old shared playlists, archived photos, passwords she used. It was like sweeping out ash after a fire. Necessary. Cleansing. And then, out of nowhere, it started. Not her. Not directly. Her sister called. I hadn't heard from Rachel in months. She and I were never best friends, but she had always liked me more than her own brother-in-law. So when she called, my first thought was something was wrong. Hey, Ryan, can we talk? About. She hesitated. About my sister. I think she's spiraling. I didn't respond right away. Spiraling? She wasn't a teenage girl. She was a grown woman who made calculated decisions. You don't get to fall apart because your consequences showed up early. She told our parents you threw her out, Rachel said carefully. Told them you cut her off. Took her money. Isolated her. What? I could hear Rachel shift uncomfortably on the other end. Look, I know she lies. I know how she works. I'm just giving you a heads up. She's rewriting everything. Painting this picture of an emotionally abusive husband who made her feel like a prisoner. She's turning it into her origin story. Of course she was. Because it was never going to be her fault. Not publicly. Not even privately. She couldn't stand the idea that anyone, might view her as the architect of her own collapse. And since Marcus wasn't buying the fairy tale anymore, she needed a new audience. New sympathy. She needed to win the breakup. She's been telling people I was abusive? I said. Rachel sighed. She's not saying it directly. She's just implying. Leaving breadcrumbs. Enough for people to fill in the blanks. That was the genius of it. She never had to say anything outright. All she had to do was drip-feed a few distorted truths, mix in a little wounded body language, and let her friends, her followers, build the myth around her. She wants back in, I said flatly. She's embarrassed, Rachel admitted. She really thought Marcus was her golden ticket. She didn't expect him to ghost her like that. And now she's rewriting the script to make me the villain. Classic. She's not well, Ryan. She was very well when she looked me in the face and told me she didn't love me anymore. Rachel didn't argue. She just sighed. Just watch your back. If she's talking to her parents like this, she'll be talking to everyone. That's when I knew this wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. This was a war of narratives. And I wasn't going to let her tell mine. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I told people the truth. Not publicly, not all at once, but to those who mattered. Friends. Family. I didn't dramatize it, didn't exaggerate. Just laid out the facts. Dates. Evidence. The screenshots. The receipts. The part where she didn't deny it. The part where she shrugged. It didn't take long. People started putting things together. I didn't need to convince anyone. She'd overplayed her hand, burned too many bridges on the way out. People started distancing themselves. The support she was counting on evaporated faster than she expected. And then, I got the second message. Her. Why are you trying to ruin me? She still didn't get it. I didn't need to ruin her. She did that all on her own. I didn't respond to that message either. Not because I didn't have something to say, but because there was nothing left worth saying. She was unraveling now, not because I ruined her, but because for the first time people weren't buying the act. And it only took a little truth. But it wasn't over. Not even close. 3 days after her little "Why are you trying to ruin me?" tantrum, I came home to find a note wedged in the doorframe. No envelope. Just folded paper, handwriting too neat to be rushed. It wasn't an apology. It was a threat. Not direct. Not actionable. Just sharp enough to cut if you knew how to read between the lines. It said, "You think people won't believe me? You forget how easy it is to turn stories into sympathy. You forget how people need a villain. You'd be surprised how fast they choose one. You should have let me come back." I stood there for a long time just staring at those words. The cold, calculated malice behind them. She wasn't begging anymore, she was baiting. Shifting into something worse. She had officially entered the scorched earth phase. But here's the thing she never calculated for: by this point, I had nothing left to lose. You can't threaten a man who's already been dragged through the fire and came out carrying the ashes. So I made a decision that would shift everything. I called her parents. We'd never been close, but they were decent people. Traditional. Respectable. Her father was a retired military guy, stern, moral, intense. Her mother was sharp as glass, always polite, but not one to ignore when things went sideways. I hadn't said a word to them since the separation. Until now. Her mom answered. Surprised. Guarded. I asked if they had 5 minutes to talk. They did. And I told them everything. Not with bitterness. Not with theatrics. Just the truth. The receipts. The screenshots. The note on my door. The way she twisted the story and left out every detail that made her look less than angelic. When I finished, there was silence. Then her mom spoke. Quiet. Cold. She said you pushed her away. I almost laughed. I gave her every chance. She walked. Her father didn't say a word. Just asked me to forward him the messages. I did. 2 hours later, I got another message from her. You went to my parents? You really are desperate. This time, I replied. Me, no. Just done pretending I have to protect someone who's trying to destroy me. She left it on read. But the next domino fell faster than I expected. Turns out her parents had been helping her financially after Marcus ditched her. Rent. Groceries. Recovery money. She played the victim hard. Claimed I drained our account. Said I threatened her. That she had nowhere else to turn. They cut her off. Immediately. That's when she snapped. She started calling. Over and over. 10 missed calls in 1 hour. Then voicemails. Crying. Angry. Pleading. Swinging between please and how could you. Between I made a mistake and you ruined my life. I didn't answer. The final voicemail she left that night was different. Calmer. Almost rehearsed. I didn't mean for things to go this way, Ryan. I was scared. You made me feel invisible. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I just needed to feel something. I didn't plan to fall apart. Please don't shut me out. Please don't do this. She paused. Then softly, I need you. No, she didn't. She needed the version of me that would have forgiven her. The one who would have taken her back. The one who still thought love meant fixing what someone else broke on purpose. But that man was gone. She killed him. And the man left behind? He was done playing savior. By the time her voicemail hit my inbox, I was already well beyond the point of needing anything from her. The sad part? She still didn't get it. She was still fighting for the wrong thing, as if the apology was all she needed to patch everything up. But there was no patching this. No quick fixes. This wasn't about fixing a relationship. It was about standing up and saying I wasn't going to let her treat me like I was disposable anymore. And in that moment, as her voice cracked through the phone, begging me for another chance, I realized just how far she had fallen. The woman who once had everything, my trust, my loyalty, my future, was now a shadow of herself, clinging to whatever scraps of control she could grasp. I didn't call back. I didn't respond to her pleas. Instead, I made a choice. A final one. To move on. 2 weeks passed. No messages. No visits. Just silence. And it felt like I was finally breathing air that wasn't tainted with her lies. I stopped checking the phone every time it buzzed, stopped scanning my inbox for her name. It didn't even matter anymore. The pieces had shifted. One night, I ran into Rachel, her sister, again. She came up to me at the grocery store, looking like she'd been running on fumes. She didn't look happy to see me, but she didn't look angry either. Just tired. And a little lost. Ryan. I wanted to thank you. For telling us the truth. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I didn't know how bad it had gotten. But I didn't know what to say to her either. I couldn't help but shake my head. You can't help someone who doesn't want help, Rachel. I tried. She nodded slowly. I know. It's just everything she said was so different when I was around. She painted this picture of you that wasn't even close to the truth. She made me believe it. Yeah, well, I said with a grim smile, it was easier for her to lie than face the fact that she made choices. Now she's stuck with the fallout. Rachel didn't argue. She didn't need to. We both knew the truth. She was the first person who saw through Jessica's act, even if it had taken too long. I'll be honest, I'm relieved. I'm glad you didn't give in. I didn't know if you would. I had to, and I did. Because at some point, you stop being the victim. You stop letting someone control your emotions with their endless manipulations. And you take back your life. As time went on, her attempts to break through continued in small ways. Her friends would message me, trying to paint me as the bad guy. Her posts on social media took on this passive-aggressive tone, like she was calling out to me without saying my name. But I didn't bite. I didn't react. Each time, I felt more detached from her, like I was watching the end of a story that had already been written, and the characters weren't even real anymore. Then one night, about a month after the last voicemail, I found out she'd moved on. It wasn't Marcus, though. It wasn't anyone I'd expect. It was a guy from work. Another savior. Another escape. This one wasn't even hiding it anymore. She posted photos of them together on vacation, holding hands on the beach. Their captions were almost too perfect. Starting fresh. Finding what we lost. I couldn't even summon the anger. It just felt like confirmation. That's all it was. Confirmation that she didn't change. That she hadn't learned a thing from everything that had happened. A few days after I saw those pictures, I got a message from her. It wasn't begging. It wasn't angry. It was almost resigned. I'm happy. You should be too. The thing is, by that point, I had no bitterness left. No need to prove anything. I wasn't holding on to the wreckage of a past that wasn't mine to fix anymore. Her happiness didn't affect me. Not anymore. She could move on with whoever she wanted. And me? I finally felt free. That was the moment I realized the most important thing of all. I didn't need her to fix me. I was already whole. I had learned everything I needed to know. Trusting her had been the mistake. But walking away from her was the redemption. And that's what mattered. For once, I had control over my own narrative. Closure doesn't arrive all at once. It doesn't knock politely, hand you a cup of tea, and sit you down to explain why everything hurt the way it did. Closure creeps in, quiet, steady. It's the sound of your own thoughts finally calming down. It's walking past a place that used to haunt you and realizing it doesn't burn anymore. It's waking up one morning and not thinking of her first. That's where I was now. Not angry, not bitter, just done. I started reconnecting with people. Real people. Friends I'd pushed aside during the chaos. People who had waited in the background while I spiraled in silence. I invited them over again, hosted a poker night, sat in the backyard with a beer, and finally let the laughter in again. Felt weird at first. But little by little, I started recognizing the guy I used to be before she broke me down. One of my closest friends, Brandon, pulled me aside at one of those nights and said something that stuck with me. You're better now. And not just because she's gone. You're better because you faced it. You didn't numb it out, you didn't pretend. You walked through the fire. He wasn't wrong. I'd faced the worst parts of it. The betrayal, the manipulation, the gaslighting, the fake apologies. I'd stood in the middle of the wreckage and chose to rebuild myself from the ground up, brick by damn brick. And I didn't need anyone's permission to do it. Then something happened I hadn't expected. I got invited to a wedding. Mutual friend. Someone who knew both me and her from the early days, before everything fell apart. I debated it. Wondered if she'd be there. Wondered if I even wanted to risk seeing her again. But in the end, I RSVP'd yes, not to prove anything, not to make a scene, but because I wanted to. Because I was allowed to go to happy places again. The day of the wedding, I showed up in a new suit, clear head, heart intact. And yeah, she was there. I spotted her halfway through the reception. She saw me too. She looked different. Not bad. Not wrecked. But not elevated either. She was there with the guy from the vacation photos, though something about them felt hollow. Like they were mimicking what love was supposed to look like instead of actually living it. She didn't approach me. I didn't approach her. There was a moment when our eyes met across the room. A long, silent moment. And I swear for the first time I saw something real flash across her face. Regret. Not because she missed me. Not because she wanted me back. But because she finally understood that I had healed without her. That she was no longer the center of my story. That I hadn't waited around like she thought I would. I'd moved on, not out of spite, but because I had to. Because surviving her wasn't enough, I had learned how to thrive again. She broke eye contact first. I turned back to the people at my table. Kept laughing. Kept drinking. Kept living. And I didn't look back again. Later that night, I left the wedding with a quiet kind of joy in my chest. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just solid. Peaceful. I knew without a doubt that she was no longer a wound. Just a scar. A reminder of what I survived. Of what I'll never settle for again. There's this idea people have, especially after heartbreak, that healing is this beautiful, poetic process. Like you're supposed to light candles, journal your way to wisdom, cry it out on rainy afternoons until you emerge enlightened, ready for love again. But that's not what it's like. Healing is ugly. It's rage you choke down during work meetings. It's avoiding certain songs because they used to mean something. It's screaming into your steering wheel after pretending all day that you're fine. It's dry eyes when you expected tears and tears when you thought you were past it. But eventually, it changes. One day you catch yourself making breakfast and realize you're humming. You walk into a room she used to dominate and it feels like your space again. You find yourself laughing, really laughing, with people who didn't vanish when you did. You stop explaining yourself to everyone. You stop telling the story. Because the truth is, the story stops needing to be told. That's where I am now. Looking back at the whole mess, how it started, how it exploded, how I crawled out of the rubble, I don't feel hatred. I don't feel love. I feel clarity. Like I've dusted off the last dirty corner of my past and can finally see things for what they were. She was a lesson. A sharp, bitter one. But a lesson. I learned that trust is sacred. I learned that silence is an answer. I learned that someone who loves you doesn't play God with your reality. I learned that being a good guy doesn't mean being a doormat. And I learned that forgiveness doesn't require reconnection. I forgave her. Not out loud. Not in person. But in the quiet moments when her name stopped sounding like a bruise and started sounding like nothing at all. That's when I knew I'd made it. So to anyone reading this who's stuck in that pit, wondering if the pain ever ends, if the betrayal will ever stop echoing, I promise you, it does. And when it does, you won't feel like you won a war. You'll feel like you stepped out of someone else's nightmare. And remembered who the hell you are. I left when I found out about my wife's affair. A year later, she came back asking for forgiveness. She didn't get it. But I got everything else. My peace. My power. My life back.